Hello and welcome back everyone. Now so far in JavaScript we've just seen how we can change content on our page or respond to user actions. But there is a lot more we can do using variables. Now variables are a very basic programming concept. They are things that you can use to store values and now use them later on in your code. Now something like this is a variable constant paragraphs. So now this is an array of paragraphs, but now we'll get into that. First of all, let's clear our page and get everything to just a basic HTML page. Now let's get into our JavaScript file and also clear up everything. So the first thing I want to do is create a new variable. Now if you remember back in your school days, you can remember solving mathematics with x and y variables. Now those were variables that had values assigned to them. Same here in JavaScript. So you can define a variable of x and set it to 1. Now in JavaScript there are two types of variables, the constants and the ones defined with lets. So now this variable of constant x is just telling us that this value must always be 1 and cannot be changed. But here when we define a variable using lets, we can go on and change that value later on in our code. So if I can just want to say, oh, I want y to now equal 1, now we won't have any issues with this. But if I were to say I also want x to equal 1, you can see that we get an error here, which just basically says cannot assign to a constant variable. So once a constant has been assigned a value, you can't change that value anymore. Now, but these are scoped, and scoped in the sense that if I define a variable of x and I go into an if block, so these are conditional blocks in JavaScript that just tells our script if something is equal to this, do this, or else do something else. So I can say if, let's define something else, is true, and just set this to true. Now this is also a variable, but in this case this should be known as a Boolean variable, which takes in the types of true or false. So you can say if true, we can come here and redefine constant x and set it to 2. Now constant x in this scope will only be available to any code that is inside this if block. So anything else outside this if block, if we log this x value, you will notice that the value that we're actually getting is this one defined in the same scope as this console.log. So if we run this script, let's go into our web page, refresh and inspect our page, go to our console, you can see we get the value of 1 here. But if I now take this console.log and put it into this true if block, you would see that we get the value of 2 here. So basically that's how we use constant variables in JavaScript. Now the next one that we have is lets. So same thing for lets variables. Let variables are also scoped but can also be redefined in their same code block. So I can say, come here and say y equals 10, and let's still have is true. And if I come here and log out the value of y, we should be getting the value of 10 right here. And that's because let variables can be redefined. Same thing if I come here and say let y equal 1. If I take this console.log y, you will see that we get the value of 1 as our y. But also, if you want to access a higher up variable in your if blocks or for loops, you can just remove whatever has been defined with that same variable name, and you will get the same thing. And now we're getting an error for x because x is no longer defined above, so we can just mute this. And when we console.log y, we should get the value of 10 right here. Okay, so I hope you understand how variables in JavaScript are scoped using each of their different code blocks. Now let's move over to interacting with our variables on our front end. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create an input and give this an ID of input text. Then I have a button and just say click me, and give this button an ID of button. I also have a paragraph here that says output. You can just have a span with the ID of output. Now the first thing we can do is let's have a second input. So let's say we want to do calculations and we want to have two different inputs that take in two different numbers and add them. So we can do that by saying input text. Let's give them different IDs, input text 1 and input text 2. So as usual, we first of all get our inputs. So input text 1 equal to document get element by ID input text 1, and we use the actual ID and define that. So create another constant, and we can use the same name. So say input text 2 is equal to input text 2. Now what we can now do is also define our button. So button get element by ID button. So now we want to add an event listener to our button. We click event listener, then our output, we forgot to set our output also, so constant output is equal to document get element by ID output. Now what we just do here is to create a new variable and say this is our result, and we get the result by adding these two values. Then come over here and say output dot inner HTML is equal to result. So we set the value of the summation of these two values to our output. So let's refresh our page, and let's say I want to add 1 and 2, and I click. Okay, we should get 3. Now I can see the issue. Right now our values are being gotten as strings. So when you get a value from an input, from a text input, that value will be gotten as a string. Now to use that in mathematical operations, we'll have to turn those into numbers, and the easiest way to do that is to use the parseInt method. So this is a JavaScript method that can turn strings into integer, so convert a string to an integer. So if we refresh our page and run this again, 1 and 2, we should get the output of 3, and any number you add should come out correctly. Okay, same thing for minus. For subtraction, set this to minus, you should get, that should work fine. So 1 minus 1, let's refresh first of all. 1 minus 1 should give us 0, minus 1, and so on. And if you also want to do multiplication, so for multiplications we use the asterisk symbol, and we'll come here and do 10 times 2. Let's refresh first. 10 times 2 should give us 20. So now we've seen how we can use variables in our JavaScript to do different operations, and how we can redefine our constants and use them in specific code blocks. Now I hope you've understood what we've learned today, and if you don't understand, of course you can drop a question down in the comment section or just search up for answers on the internet. Now that will be all for this video, and in the next video we'll be looking at arrays and the different types of arrays we have, the way data is stored in arrays, and all of that. So I hope to see you in that video, and bye for now.